My discourse is biological anthropology. We will begin by discussing what biological anthropology is. Anthropology is just the study of humans. There are various fields that study different things about human beings. Biological anthropology is the study of what makes humans biologically unique. It covers a wide variety of fields, bioarchaeology, primatology to human biology. A good quote that I found that demonstrates the importance of the field and how the field is currently being structured is from Blakey. And he says, biological anthropology, of course, is more than STEM. It is where STEM, social sciences, and the humanities meet. This is important because this is part of what's making the discourse in the field so interesting as well as difficult to structure now because the field has moved from a hard biological science into more of a integrated holistic science. The articles I analyzed were first developmental systems and inequality, thinking evolutionary and political economic theory and biological anthropology by Hicks and Leonard, which is just a study of how society and our economic systems came about, how they affect us, and trying to link that to evolution, which is difficult because 10,000 years of human civilization is not much in evolutionary time. My second article, Food, Water, and Scarcity Towards a Broader Anthropology of Resource Insecurity, is an article looking at how food and water scarcity are different, and then bringing it together and discussing how they should be also observed together. And then finally, an evolutionary anthropological perspective on modern human origins by Marine is an article basically just demonstrating the biological perspective and the anthropological perspective on modern human origins and what caused our speciation from other primates. The rhetorical subjects of analysis that I did were for structure, then the terminology, and then finally the audiences of the articles. So for structure, they use abstracts and introductions. They aren't really notified as either of those, but there is an introduction paragraph that helps describe what the article is going to be talking about before they get into it. And then once they get into it, there are titles and subheadings which help guide the reader as well as the writer and keep things focused. Wutich and Brewis in their food and water article use an interesting thing where they have headings of the general propositions, and then they have subheadings where they talk about different things within that general proposition that might be affecting it. And then at the end of each of these subheadings, they have a small conclusion where they just basically frame, this is what we're trying to get at with this section of the article, which is very helpful, very interesting, makes it easier to read and understand what's going on. Then in the two articles I read from Current Anthropology, which were the food and water scarcity, as well as the political, economic, and evolutionary theory articles, they both have comment reply sections where immediately after the conclusion, they have a comment section where other scientists from other schools and from other research fields comment. And they say, well, this is what I think. This was good. I think maybe your perspective could be aided by viewing it from this angle instead. And then following the comment, reply section where the authors of the article reply and basically just give their thoughts on the comments and discuss how they might change their research in the future based on the comments. And this is just a really good example of how the field is evolving, as well as these articles are very clearly for other biological anthropologists to read and comment on to help progress things further. Next, the content of the articles and the way that they structure it. So all three articles are discussing different things and then trying to integrate them. And the way that they do this is the beginning of the article is very detailed descriptions of the individual theories. And they use meta-analysis, they use other researchers, they pull everything together to try and describe the theory that they are going to be integrating, the theories that they're going to be integrating. And then finally, after all of this is done, they do an integration piece where they start to bring everything together and they go, this is how these things all come together. This is the hypothesis that we're promoting, why this might be important or beneficial to the field. And then they conclude with the typical conclusion. Second, terminology. So within the field, they use abbreviations for time because it's an evolutionary science. Geological sciences also do this because there's so much time passing. And so they use Ka to abbreviate for 1,000 years ago. So 6 Ka is 6,000 years ago. Also goes for millions. And then basic taxonomy. If you are reading a bunch of species names and you don't understand what taxonomy is, you're going to be confused by this. You'll read H. sapiens. You don't know what H means. But if you have an understanding of it, you know, oh, that means Homo sapiens. They're talking about humans. Or P. peniscus, they're talking about Pan peniscus, which are bonobos. And then the final field, the final terminology, there's more, but these are the three important ones, I think, from the articles I read, is the understanding of what neo-Darwinism is, which is just basically, it's the most popular theory in evolution right now, but it's starting to shift because of what's happening in biological anthropology, where it's the idea that you can observe adaptation and speciation purely through genetics. like genetic factors are the only things that we're observing at this point. And that's starting to change as we're understanding that, like, well, actually, we have really complex social behaviors, and those aren't necessarily entirely genetic. They can be affected by epigenetics, which are genetics changing. These things are important. And if you understand this, it makes it easier because neo-Darwinism is starting to be dismantled by more research that we're starting to do as the field becomes more holistic. Now, finally, the audiences. Primary audience members is the members of the discipline supported by the comment and reply section. Secondary audience members are those of other social sciences because of the holisticness of the field and because we're trying to get as many eyes onto these problems and onto these theories as we possibly can because they are very important to developing better human life. And finally, the tertiary audience, and this is what we're going to talk about for the last little bit, is just the general public and public officials, because understanding how things happened or why we do things is very important to structuring society. We can see this in criminal justice. We can see this in economic insecurity. We can see these things being very important. And if we had an actual functional understanding of them, outside of just the current popular stigma that we have of individualism in the West, especially, we can more effectively create and promote societies that benefit more people. So with this, the rhetoric in the field is changing. In the past, in biological anthropology, it was physical anthropology, and it was created primarily to reinforce the idea of European race and class, primarily to justify inequity. Divine right of kings disappeared. We had to find another reason to justify why poor people are poor or why that race of people is different than us. Especially for Europeans, there's an obsession with it. And because of this, it was a colonial project. And so anthropologists got sent to colonies to study why are these weird exotic people so different from us. And as colonialism fell apart, and after the Second World War and the Holocaust, and this magical realization that, oh, maybe eugenics is kind of not real and not scientific, this field has been incredibly harmful to humanity. It has done untold harm to millions, if not billions, of human beings across the globe. And now it is having to come to terms with that. It's having to come to terms with the fact all of this was wrong and it harmed people. In this time period, this is very lucrative. Of course, if you're going to go and prove to the king why he's better or why all the white people are better by going and observing a tribe in Africa, then of course they're going to pay you to go do that because, yeah, of course, we'd love to understand why we're so much better than everybody else. But nowadays, it's kind of shifted after the Second World War, after most colonization stopped. It wasn't as lucrative to send people to these foreign areas. And so the field started focusing more on actual Europeans. And it started to kind of center itself back. And now we are starting to get to a point where we're like, okay, well, as important as Europeans are, these other humans are just as important, and we're all the same species, so we need to observe each other and understand each other. And this is problematic for the rhetoric within the field because this individualism that we built up in the West to justify the inequity that we live with every day is not scientifically merited, which is something that has not been accepted for a long time. Those things do not benefit the people who are currently holding all of the power and money. So it becomes very difficult to get these studies paid for, as well as difficult for these ideas to be conveyed to a people in a way that allows them to accept it without immediately jumping to a conclusion and going, that sounds like, well, crap. That sounds like it's BS. I don't believe that because that doesn't submit to my culturally defined ideas of what human beings are. And so the problem in the field is having to find a way to rhetorically get across these ideas of equity and community and the importance of these things without triggering the innate biases that the general public has against communalization and against not being so obsessed with the individual. And with this, it creates a difficulty for scientists because scientists like to be objective and and a lot of this feels very unobjective, and it's hard to find testable ways to prove these things outside of small little instances. And so the field is struggling to find a way to wrestle with its own past and confronting it, as well as adjusting the future research to benefit the most people, whereas in the past it was built to benefit those in power. Now it's being used as it should be because it's supposed to be scientifically objective to understand all of us and to benefit all of us. So that is the discourse in biological anthropology, and here are my sources. So thank you so much. Have a good day.